Title: The Infinite Desert and the Wandering Brigade. In a world where the sun never sets and the sands stretch beyond the horizon, a brigade of wanderers moves through the vast expanse of the infinite desert. Their journey is one of survival, mystery, and discovery. Each day brings new challenges, and the desert itself seems alive, whispering secrets only those brave enough to listen can hear. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the golden sands of the infinite desert. A scorching wind swept through the barren landscape, carrying with it the faintest trace of something more than the dry earth. The air shimmered, and the horizon seemed to blur, as if the desert itself was breathing. The brigade marched on, their feet leaving only temporary marks in the endless expanse. A ragtag group of individuals, bound together by fate, by the search for something they couldn't define. They were travelers, adventurers, or perhaps lost souls, each with their own reason for being in this unforgiving place. But no matter how many days they walked, the desert remained unchanged, its secrets locked deep within its vastness. Captain Aldrin, the leader of the brigade, stood at the front, his face weathered by countless days under the harsh sun. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the endless dunes seemed to melt into the sky. "We are close," he murmured to himself, more to the desert than to his companions. "I can feel it." Behind him, the brigade moved in silence. There was little conversation, for words in the desert often seemed pointless. The endless sand stretched in every direction, and each step felt like they were walking deeper into a realm where time had no meaning. The sun, now beginning to sink into the distant sands, bathed the desert in a golden glow. But as the light waned, the temperature plummeted, and the night, cold and unyielding, crept in. The desert was both merciless and beautiful, a place where the line between life and death blurred. A young woman, Lyra, brought up the rear of the brigade. She was a quiet soul, often lost in thought, her eyes always scanning the horizon. She had joined the brigade in search of answers, but what answers could the desert offer? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps crunching on the sand beside her. It was Elias, a man with a voice as soft as the wind but a presence that could command attention when needed. "Still thinking about it?" Elias asked, his gaze drifting to the same endless expanse. Lyra nodded slowly. "The desert. It calls to me. It speaks in ways I can't explain. It feels like it knows something we don't." Elias smiled faintly. "Perhaps the desert is less a place and more a state of being. A mirror to our own souls, reflecting our deepest fears, our greatest desires." Lyra turned to him, eyes narrowing. "Do you really believe that? Or are you just trying to make sense of this madness?" Elias shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes, madness is just another way of understanding. The desert has a way of changing people." The wind shifted, and the temperature dropped even further. The stars above began to twinkle, their light distant yet comforting. But the comfort was fleeting. For the desert was never truly kind, no matter how beautiful the night sky appeared. As the brigade settled for the night, the sounds of the desert took over. The soft rustling of the sand in the wind, the distant cry of some unknown creature, these were the only sounds that pierced the stillness. Captain Aldrin stood by the campfire, his eyes scanning the horizon, his mind never at rest. He had led his brigade through countless trials, but this desert was unlike any place they had encountered before. He stared into the fire, its warm glow reflecting in his hardened eyes. There was a strange feeling in the air tonight, something he couldn't quite place. "Something different, Captain," a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Caden, one of the younger members of the brigade. He had joined the group only a few months ago, eager for adventure but still untested by the harshness of the desert. "What is it, Caden?" Aldrin asked, his voice low but steady. I don't know, Captain. It's just, I feel like we're being watched. There's something out there, Caden said, his voice trembling with uncertainty. Aldrin's gaze hardened, but he didn't speak immediately. The desert had a way of playing tricks on the mind, of making even the most seasoned wanderer question reality. But something about Caden's words struck a chord in him. Perhaps it was the desperation in the young man's voice, or maybe the fact that Aldrin himself had been feeling the same unease. Stay alert, Aldrin commanded. Rest when you can, but don't let your guard down. The brigade settled into their watches, taking turns around the campfire. Lyra, still lost in her thoughts, gazed up at the starry sky. The stars were a constant in the desert, but tonight they seemed different. There was a subtle shift in their light, as if they too were aware of the brigade's presence. As the night deepened, the winds began to pick up. They howled like ghosts, swirling around the camp with increasing intensity. Lyra pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, shivering against the sudden chill. It was as though the desert itself was alive, breathing and moving with purpose. Suddenly, a sound cut through the wind, a faint whisper. At first, it was so soft that Lyra thought it might be her imagination. But then it came again, clearer this time. It was a voice, distant and faint, yet unmistakable. The whisper called her name. Lyra. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned, looking around the camp, but the others were unaware, lost in their own thoughts or asleep. She stood, her legs trembling, and moved toward the edge of the firelight. The whisper came again, stronger now, urging her forward. Lyra, come closer. Without thinking, she took a step toward the darkness beyond the firelight. Her instincts told her to turn back, to wake the others, but something in the voice, something in the desert's call, made her unable to resist. The sand beneath her feet shifted as she walked, the wind howling louder as if protesting her decision. But she moved on, her steps slow and deliberate. The voice seemed to be pulling her in, guiding her toward something. A flash of movement caught her eye, something in the distance, just beyond the dunes. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a figure, a shadow moving across the sands. But when she blinked, it was gone, swallowed by the vastness of the desert. She stopped, her breath shallow. The whisper was gone, replaced by an eerie silence. The air felt thick with tension, as if the very desert was holding its breath. And then, suddenly, a crackling noise erupted from behind her. She spun around, her heart racing, to find Captain Aldrin standing just a few paces away. His eyes were wide, his expression grim. You felt it too, didn't you? He asked quietly. Lyra nodded, unable to speak. She had no words for what she had experienced, only the unshakable sense that something far greater than themselves was at work in this desert. We need to move, Aldrin said firmly. The desert is waking up. We've disturbed something, and I fear it is not pleased. The brigade quickly gathered their belongings, their sleep forgotten in an instant. The calm of the night had shattered, replaced by an urgency none of them could ignore. The winds grew stronger, as though the desert itself was pushing them forward, guiding them toward an unknown destination. As they moved across the shifting sands, the air seemed to grow colder, the sky darker. The stars, once comforting, now felt distant, cold, and indifferent. The vast expanse of the desert seemed to stretch on forever, an endless sea of sand with no end in sight. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time had lost all meaning. The desert showed no mercy. The brigade stumbled, exhausted but determined, pressing on through the relentless winds and the oppressive heat. Yet no matter how far they traveled, no matter how much they hoped to find an oasis or shelter, the desert seemed endless. And then, as they crested yet another dune, they saw it. A massive structure, half buried in the sands. It rose before them like a forgotten monument, its jagged silhouette cutting through the horizon. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a temple of sorts, but one that seemed ancient beyond reckoning. The desert had hidden it for eons, its secrets buried beneath layers of time and sand. Aldrin's heart raced. This was what they had been searching for. But as they approached the temple, the wind howled louder, as if warning them. The desert was alive, and it had not forgotten the ones who dared to enter. The wind howled around them, swirling the sand in chaotic patterns. The ancient temple loomed before the brigade, its dark silhouette casting long shadows in the dim light of the desert night. The air felt thick with an unspoken tension, as though the very earth beneath their feet was holding its breath. Captain Aldrin stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the temple's entrance, a gaping doorway swallowed by shadows. The stone walls were weathered by centuries of exposure to the desert's unrelenting forces, but the structure still stood strong, defying the passage of time. "We're here," Aldrin said, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken thoughts. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword, ready for whatever might come next. "This is what we've been searching for. But we must remain cautious. The desert does not give up its secrets easily." Lyra stepped up beside him, her eyes scanning the temple with an intense, almost fearful curiosity. The desert had brought them here, to this forgotten place. But what awaited them within? And what price would they have to pay for the knowledge it held? "I can feel it," Lyra whispered. "It's as if the temple is alive, watching us." Elias, standing a few paces behind them, spoke up. "Alive? Lyra, the temple is just stone and sand. There's nothing supernatural about it." But his words rang hollow in the eerie silence. Even Caden, who had been quick to dismiss the more fantastical notions of their journey, felt a deep unease settle in his chest. The whispering winds around them seemed to carry more than just the S, and they carried a warning. The ground beneath their feet shifted, and a low rumble vibrated through the earth. The sand in front of the temple began to swirl violently, as if some unseen force was pushing it away. Slowly, a stone door slid open, revealing the dark interior of the temple. "Is this part of the temple's design?" Elias asked, his voice tight with a mix of fear and awe. "It's not just the desert," Aldrin murmured, taking a step toward the open doorway. "The temple is reacting to us." The brigade stood still for a moment, the weight of the situation settling in. The temple's entrance beckoned, but none of them were certain of what lay within. "We don't have a choice," Aldrin said, his voice resolute. "We came this far. We must enter." Without another word, he led the brigade inside. The air within the temple was cool, a sharp contrast to the oppressive heat outside. The walls were lined with ancient carvings, faded by time but still discernible. Each one seemed to tell a story, a history lost to the sands. As they ventured deeper, the silence grew more pronounced. The only sound was the faint echo of their footsteps, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the structure. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if the temple was alive, watching, waiting. They arrived at a large chamber, its walls covered in intricate symbols. In the center of the room stood an altar, weathered and cracked by the passage of time. The stone was covered in dust, but a faint, unnatural glow emanated from it. It was as though the altar had been waiting for them, calling them to it. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. "The heart of the temple." Aldrin stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He could feel the pull of the altar, as if it was drawing him in, beckoning him to uncover its secrets. He approached it slowly, each step measured and cautious. "What do you think it is?" Caden asked, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "I don't know," Aldrin admitted. "But we will soon find out." As he reached the altar, the ground beneath them trembled once more, the rumbling growing louder and more intense. The air thickened, swirling around them in a vortex of sand and dust. The glow from the altar intensified, blinding them for a moment. And then, from the shadows of the chamber, a voice echoed, deep and resonant. It was not human, but something ancient, something older than time itself. "Why have you come?" The voice reverberated through their minds, not spoken aloud but felt deep within their souls. The brigade froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The voice was not just a question, it was a command, a challenge. Aldrin's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, but he didn't draw it. This was not a battle of blades, but of wills. "We've come to seek the truth," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "Truth," the voice repeated the words slowly, almost mockingly. "Truth lies beyond what you are prepared to understand. The desert does not give its knowledge freely." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the altar. She could feel the weight of the voice pressing down on her, but something inside her urged her to continue. "Then we will earn it," she said softly, her voice filled with determination. For a long moment, there was silence. The sand swirled around them, the temperature dropping even further. Then, the voice spoke again, this time softer, almost as if it were considering their words. "Very well. The truth you seek is within your grasp. But beware, for the cost of knowledge is steep. Are you willing to pay it?" Aldrin turned to the others, his eyes scanning their faces. They had all come this far. They had all endured the desert's trials and the mysteries it held. But the price of the truth was still unknown. The question now was whether they were ready to face the consequences. "We have no choice," Aldrin said, his voice low but filled with resolve. "We've come too far." With that, the sand beneath their feet seemed to shift once more, and the altar's glow intensified. The voice in the temple faded, but its presence remained, lingering like a shadow. The brigade stood at the threshold of the unknown, ready to face whatever the desert and the temple had in store for them. As the glow from the altar brightened, the very air in the chamber seemed to hum with energy. The faint sound of whispering winds seemed to fill the room, though there were no windows, no openings to the outside world. It was as if the temple itself was alive, breathing with them, watching them. Aldrin felt a strange pull at his chest, an inexplicable tug that beckoned him to approach the altar. He glanced at Lyra and the others, their expressions a mix of awe, fear, and curiosity. He could feel their unease, the weight of the moment pressing down on them all. The voice echoed in his mind once more, its presence growing stronger, more insistent. "You seek the truth, but do you understand the price? Knowledge is not without consequence. Those who have come before you have lost themselves to it." Aldrin hesitated. The words of the voice were clear, but there was something in them, a warning. He had come here seeking answers, but what if the truth came at too great a cost? What if uncovering the temple's secrets meant losing himself, or worse, losing his brigade? The sand around them shifted once again, swirling with an unnatural force, and a cold gust of wind blew through the chamber, rustling the ancient carvings on the walls. The glowing light from the altar intensified, casting strange, flickering shadows on the stone. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes locked on the altar, drawn by the same force that Aldrin felt. She reached out, her hand trembling, as if she could already sense the weight of the decision ahead. "I feel it," she whispered, her voice shaky. "The knowledge. It's right there, just within reach." Aldrin reached out and grabbed her arm, pulling her back gently. "Lyra, don't. We don't know what we're dealing with here." But she shook her head, her determination unwavering. We've come all this way. We can't turn back now, Captain. The others, standing in silence behind them, nodded in agreement. There was no turning back. They had crossed the threshold of this ancient temple, and now they had to face whatever lay ahead. With a deep breath, Aldrin let go of Lyra's arm. Then let's face it together. Lyra reached out again, this time her hand resting on the stone surface of the altar. The glow from it pulsed beneath her touch, as though it recognized her presence. A low, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through their bones. Very well, the voice said, its tone shifting, as though it were pleased by their decision. You wish to know, but remember this knowledge will change you. In that moment, the ground beneath them trembled. The air grew thick, the temperature plummeting as if the very essence of the desert had entered the temple. The light from the altar flared brighter, blinding them for a split second. And then silence. When their eyes adjusted to the dim lighting again, they found themselves no longer standing in the stone chamber, but in a vast, endless landscape. The desert stretched out in all directions, the sand shimmering like gold beneath a strange, alien sky. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the dunes. It was as if the desert had opened a doorway into a new world. Aldrin blinked, disoriented. He looked around, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword, but the familiar weight of the blade was gone. The others were just as stunned, their faces pale with shock. What is this? Caden asked, his voice a mix of fear and awe. This isn't the desert we know, Lyra whispered, her eyes wide. This is something else. Suddenly, a figure appeared on the horizon, a shadow moving toward them. It was tall, cloaked in tattered robes that billowed in the wind. The figure's face was obscured, but they could feel its presence, a weight of ancient power that radiated from it like a storm on the horizon. As the figure drew nearer, the brigade instinctively took a step back, unsure whether this being was friend or foe. The sand beneath their feet shifted again, swirling in response to the figure's approach. Who are you? Aldrin demanded, his voice steady, though his heart raced. What is this place? The figure stopped just within earshot, its voice echoing with an ancient, otherworldly tone. I am the guardian of the sands, the figure intoned. You have crossed into the realm of knowledge. This is not a place for the faint-hearted. You seek the truth, but do you understand what it means to know everything? The voice was deep, almost a whisper, yet it carried a weight that shook the very air around them. Lyra stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the figure. We want to understand. We've traveled so far. We've come through the desert's trials to reach this place. We need the truth. The Guardian's hooded gaze seemed to pierce through them, as if it could see into their very souls. The truth is not something you can take lightly, the Guardian replied. It is a burden, a weight that will change you. The sands that you have crossed will not forget you. And neither will the truths you will uncover. Aldrin stepped forward then, his resolve hardening. We are ready. We've made it this far. We're not turning back. The Guardian remained silent for a moment, then slowly raised its hand, gesturing toward the endless desert around them. Very well. But remember, the desert has a way of claiming those who seek too much. Once you step onto this path, there is no returning to the way things were. Aldrin nodded, his gaze unwavering. We understand. We're ready. With a deep, echoing sigh, the Guardian extended its hand toward them, a swirling vortex of sand rising from the ground, enveloping them in a storm of golden light. The world around them seemed to twist and bend, the desert vanishing as the swirling sands carried them deeper into the unknown. The sandstorm whirled around them with a deafening roar, blinding their eyes and shaking the very foundations of their world. As the vortex of golden sand spun faster, their senses were overwhelmed by an all-encompassing weight. The air was thick, charged with an energy unlike anything they had ever felt. It was as if the desert itself had become a living thing, its sands a conduit for an ancient power that surged around them. Aldrin felt his feet lift from the ground as the sands rose in a spiraling storm, pulling him into the heart of the vortex. He reached out instinctively for the others, but they were scattered, lost in the swirling chaos. The wind howled in his ears, drowning out his thoughts, and for a moment, he wondered if this would be the end of their journey. But then, the world around them shifted. The swirling sands parted as though an unseen force had cleared the air. The storm ceased as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the brigade standing in a place unlike any they had ever seen. The sky above them was a strange, shifting shade of purple and gold, and the ground beneath their feet was not sand, but smooth, shimmering stone. Strange pillars rose from the ground, their surfaces etched with glowing symbols that pulsed with an eerie light. The air was thick with a heavy silence, broken only by the faint echo of their breathing. The desert had disappeared, replaced by a strange, otherworldly landscape. The sun hung in the sky, but it cast no heat. Its light was cold, distant, and yet strangely comforting. Lyra staggered forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. Where are we? This isn't the desert. This is something else. Caden, still shaken by the storm, looked around with growing fear. Is this a dream? Or a nightmare? Aldrin remained silent, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his sword. He knew that whatever this place was, it was no ordinary realm. The weight of the air, the strange light, the energy that hummed beneath the surface, it all pointed to something ancient, something far beyond their understanding. It's real, Aldrin said finally, his voice low but firm. Whatever this is, it's real. And we need to keep moving. The brigade took a cautious step forward, the smooth stone beneath their feet echoing with each movement. The strange pillars surrounding them seemed to shift as they walked, their glowing symbols flickering in time with their steps. It was as though the very landscape was alive, responding to their presence. Look, Lyra said, pointing ahead. A large structure loomed in the distance, a massive archway carved from the same shimmering stone. Its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to pulse with the same glowing energy as the pillars. That's where we need to go, Aldrin said, his voice tinged with both awe and determination. They began to move toward the archway, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. As they drew closer, the air grew heavier, the energy more intense. The carvings on the arch seemed to come alive, swirling and shifting as if they were telling a story of ancient times, of lost knowledge, and of power beyond comprehension. When they reached the base of the arch, they stopped. The doorway stood before them, its glowing symbols pulsating with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Do you feel it? Lyra whispered. The pull, it's as if something is drawing us inside. Aldrin nodded, his eyes scanning the archway. He could feel it too, unmistakable pull of something ancient, something that held the answers they had sought in the desert. But there was also something else, something darker, lurking just beneath the surface. Whatever lies beyond this door, we must be ready, Aldrin said. We can't turn back now. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, his hand brushing against the arch. The moment his fingers made contact, the door shuddered, and the symbols on its surface flared to life, casting an intense light that bathed the brigade in its glow. The air crackled with energy, and for a brief moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. Then, without warning, the door opened. Beyond it was a vast chamber, its walls lined with bookshelves that stretched up into the sky. The shelves were filled with ancient scrolls, tomes, and strange artifacts that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The room was illuminated by a soft, ethereal light that seemed to come from nowhere, filling every corner of the chamber. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, stood an ornate throne, its backrest adorned with carvings of dragons, serpents, and other mythical creatures. On the throne sat a figure, draped in robes of silver and gold, their face obscured by a veil of shimmering light. As the brigade stepped into the room, the figure on the throne stirred. The air around them seemed to hum with anticipation. "You have arrived," the figure said, their voice reverberating through the chamber. It was not just a sound, it was a presence, deep and resonant, as though the very fabric of reality bent around the words. Aldrin took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What is this place?" The figure on the throne raised a hand, and the light around them flared, casting long shadows across the room. "I am the keeper of knowledge," the figure replied. "I guard the truths of the world, truths that were lost to time, hidden away in the depths of this realm. You have sought the truth, but know this: the knowledge you seek comes at a price." A cold shiver ran down Aldrin's spine. "What price?" he asked. The keeper of knowledge's voice softened. "The price is not one that can be measured in gold or treasure. The truth you seek will change you. It will reshape your destiny. The path you walk now will lead you into the heart of the world's secrets, but be warned, the deeper you go, the harder it will be to return." "Are you truly prepared to bear this burden?" Aldrin's mind raced. The weight of the keeper's words pressed down on him. The brigade had come so far, crossed the endless desert, faced countless dangers. But could they truly bear the weight of the truth? Would they lose themselves in the knowledge they sought? He turned to look at Lyra, Caden, and the others. They were all silent, their eyes filled with the same uncertainty that weighed on him. But in each of their gazes, there was something else, something that had always been there, something that had driven them forward through the endless dunes of the desert. They had come this far. They couldn't turn back now. "We are ready," Aldrin said, his voice steady. The keeper of knowledge's veil shimmered, and for a moment, the chamber seemed to blur as though reality itself were bending around them. "Very well," the keeper intoned. "Then you shall know. But remember, once you have seen the truth, it cannot be unseen. You will carry it with you, always." As the keeper's words reverberated through the chamber, the air seemed to thicken, the very fabric of reality bending and twisting as though the room itself was alive. The light dimmed momentarily, and a deep, resonant hum filled the space, as if the temple was awakening, responding to their presence. Aldrin stepped forward, his heart pounding as he approached the keeper's throne. The others followed him, their faces illuminated by the strange light that emanated from the walls. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the vast chamber, the silence so intense it felt as though the world itself held its breath. The keeper of knowledge did not move from their throne, but their voice was clear, filling the space around them with an almost tangible presence. "You have come seeking truth, but truth is a double-edged sword. It can heal or harm, guide or mislead. There are truths in this place that could break your very soul, and there are truths that could set you free. Which will you choose to see?" Aldrin felt a shiver run down his spine as the weight of the question settled over him. The words echoed in his mind, and for a moment, doubt gnawed at him. Could they truly bear the burden of the knowledge hidden here? Was the truth they sought worth the cost? But then, he thought of the endless desert, the battles they had fought, and the sacrifices made. They had come so far, faced the trials, endured the storms of the desert. They couldn't turn back now. The knowledge was within reach, and they had to find it, no matter what. "We choose to see," Aldrin said, his voice steady, though his insides trembled. "We must know." The keeper's voice softened, but there was no warmth in it, only the cold certainty of the ages. "Very well. You have made your choice." With a flick of the keeper's hand, the room shifted. The air grew heavy, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. The walls of the chamber began to shimmer, the carvings glowing with an intense light. The symbols on the pillars, the etched runes, and the intricate designs on the throne seemed to come to life, swirling with vibrant colors, as though they were opening the very gates to a realm beyond comprehension. And then, the truth began to unfold. The air crackled with energy, and images began to appear in the space before them, visions of the past, the present, and the future, all blending together in a swirling vortex of light and shadow. Aldrin blinked, and for a moment, he was no longer standing in the chamber. He was standing in the heart of the desert, watching as a vast, golden empire rose from the sands, its towering spires reaching toward the heavens. The earth trembled beneath the weight of its power, and the air shimmered with the energy of a civilization long lost to time. But that was not all. As the vision swirled, Aldrin saw darker images of destruction and ruin. The empire crumbled, torn apart by internal strife and external forces, its glory fading into nothingness. He saw the desert itself, once a cradle of life, turned into a barren wasteland, the sands consumed by an insatiable darkness that spread like a plague, choking the life from the land. Aldrin's heart raced as he watched, unable to look away. The visions were too real, too vivid, like a history that had been sealed away for eternity, waiting to be unearthed. He saw the rise of the desert's ancient rulers, powerful beings who had once controlled the sands and the winds, only to be undone by their own ambition. He saw the battles fought, the lives lost, and the secrets buried beneath the dunes, waiting to be uncovered. But then, a new image emerged, one that filled Aldrin with both dread and awe. He saw a figure, a man, draped in a cloak of darkness, standing at the center of a vast, empty landscape. His eyes burned with an unnatural fire, and his hands crackled with the power of the void. The man lifted his arms, and the earth trembled beneath him, as though the very foundations of the world were being torn asunder. The man was the key to it all, the force that had turned the desert into a place of eternal suffering, a place where time itself had been twisted and broken. Aldrin understood then that the desert was not just a wasteland, it was a prison. A place where the very fabric of reality had been corrupted, where the boundaries between life and death, truth and lies, were blurred beyond recognition. The keeper's voice broke through the visions, their tone grave. The man you see is the one who broke the world. He is the source of the darkness that plagues this land. His ambition shattered the very essence of existence, and now the desert, the land of endless sand, is a reflection of that brokenness. You have come seeking the truth, but know this: the truth is not a simple thing. It is a mirror, reflecting not only the past but the future. What you choose to do with this knowledge will determine whether the desert's curse is lifted or whether it will consume everything in its path. Aldrin staggered back, his head spinning from the overwhelming flood of images and the weight of the truth pressing down on him. He could feel the desert's curse, its dark grip tightening around him. He had always known that their journey was more than just a search for answers, it was a fight against something far greater than they could have ever imagined. The others were silent, each of them absorbed in their own vision of the truth, each of them grappling with the revelations that had been laid bare before them. Lyra's face was pale, her eyes wide with shock, while Caden gripped his sword tightly, his jaw clenched as though he were holding back a torrent of emotions. Aldrin turned to the keeper, his voice hoarse. "What do we do now? How can we stop it?" The keeper's eyes, unseen behind their veil of shimmering light, glimmered with a sorrowful understanding. "The path is not easy. The man you saw, the one who shattered the world, was once a guardian, much like you. But his fall was inevitable. There is no undoing what has been done. The only choice you have now is whether to accept the fate of the world or to fight against it." Aldrin's heart sank. The fate of the world was at stake, and they had been given a choice, one that would shape the future of the desert, and perhaps the world itself. But no matter the cost, no matter the burden, they had come too far to turn back. "We will fight," Aldrin said, his voice filled with resolve. "We will stop the darkness. We will undo the curse, no matter what it takes." The keeper's voice faded into the air, their final words lingering like a warning. "Then prepare yourselves. The desert will not let you go easily. The truth you have learned will guide you, but the path ahead will be treacherous. The journey is far from over." With those final words, the light in the chamber flickered, and the visions faded. Leaving the brigade standing in the silence of the temple, their hearts heavy with the weight of the truth. The desert awaited them, and with it, the challenge of stopping the darkness that threatened to consume everything. But Aldrin knew, with certainty, that their journey had only just begun. As the echoes of the keeper's voice faded, the chamber grew eerily quiet. The oppressive weight of the knowledge they had just uncovered settling heavily on their shoulders. Aldrin stood motionless, the glow from the walls now dimming as the visions ceased. The brigade, shaken but resolute, exchanged looks. The truth they had witnessed would forever change them, but it also gave them the clarity they needed. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers unimaginable, yet they had a purpose now, a purpose that would not be denied. Aldrin took a deep breath, steadying himself as he turned to face his comrades. "We cannot allow what we saw to come to pass. We need to act before the desert consumes more lives." Caden nodded, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword as he glanced out into the swirling sands beyond the temple's entrance. "The one who shattered the world still walks the desert, doesn't he?" Lyra's eyes were wide, her fingers trembling as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The keeper spoke of him as though he was not just a force of darkness, but someone who had once been one of us. "A guardian." Her voice wavered as she spoke the word. "Could he have been like this once? A protector before the fall?" "Yes," Aldrin said, his voice low, filled with the weight of what they had just learned. "A guardian, a protector, but somewhere along the way, he lost his way, allowing ambition and darkness to take hold. We cannot make that same mistake." The wind outside howled, a reminder of the desert's relentless power, and the brigade stood in somber silence, contemplating their next move. The keeper's cryptic words lingered in the air, and Aldrin couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of the truth. The desert, this endless, shifting sea of sand, was more than just a wasteland. It was a battleground, a place where the past and future collided. The sun, now setting low on the horizon, cast long shadows across the desert. The keeper had warned them the path ahead was fraught with peril, and the very sands could be an enemy. The brigade had to be ready. As they turned to leave the temple, Aldrin took one last look at the ethereal glow that had filled the chamber. "We will find him," he said, his voice steady. "And we will stop him." The journey ahead was long, and the brigade knew that the desert would not give up its secrets easily. It was a vast, unforgiving landscape, and even with the knowledge they had gained, they were but small specks against its boundless expanse. But the choice had been made. They would fight against the darkness, no matter the cost. The brigade's journey through the desert was both an external and internal struggle. As the days passed, the relentless sun beat down upon them, and the sand seemed to stretch out endlessly before them. The landscape was an unbroken sea of dunes, each one appearing the same as the last, until the horizon blurred into an indistinct line between earth and sky. The heat was unbearable, and the desert's silence oppressive. At night, the temperature dropped drastically, leaving them chilled to the bone. Huddled together around their fire, trying to catch what little rest they could, But there was no real respite. The desert was alive with whispers, voices carried on the wind, ghostly remnants of those who had once walked its vastness, only to be lost to the sands. Aldrin, though weary, remained vigilant. The desert had a way of sapping a person's strength, of eroding both body and spirit. But he had seen what happened to those who gave up, those who let the desert take them. He couldn't afford to be weak. One night, as they sat by the fire, Aldrin looked at his comrades, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. Caden sat in silence, sharpening his sword with practiced precision, while Lyra stared into the fire, lost in thought. Aldrin spoke softly. "Do you think it's possible to redeem someone after they've fallen so far?" Lyra looked up, her gaze distant. "Redemption. Is it something that can be earned, or is it just an illusion we chase?" Caden set down his blade and nodded, as if weighing the question. "I think it depends on the person. But I also think that not everyone wants to be redeemed. Some souls are lost to the darkness forever." Aldrin's heart clenched. He had hoped that there was still a chance that the man they had seen in the visions could somehow be saved. But the reality of the desert was harsh, and perhaps some things were beyond repair. "We'll know when we find him," Aldrin said, his voice quiet but firm. "And when we do, we'll make our choice." The desert night stretched on, cold and unyielding. The stars above seemed to mock them, so distant and unreachable, just as their quest seemed to be. But they had made it this far. They could not stop now. The following morning, a storm was brewing on the horizon. The winds had begun to pick up, and the sky grew darker with each passing moment. The brigade hastened their pace, knowing that a sandstorm in the desert could be deadly. The fine grains of sand whipped through the air with ferocity, and the once calm dunes transformed into a chaotic whirlwind of dust and sand. As the storm closed in, Aldrin shouted over the howling winds, "We need to find shelter. Hurry!" Caden grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward a rocky outcrop in the distance. "There!" he yelled, pointing toward the dark silhouette of the rocks. "We can take cover there." The brigade ran, their faces covered to protect against the biting sand. The storm raged behind them, and soon they were enveloped in a haze of swirling sand, unable to see more than a few feet in front of them. They stumbled and fell, struggling to keep their bearings in the blinding storm. Finally, they reached the shelter of the rocks. Panting and exhausted, they collapsed beneath the jagged outcroppings, the wind still howling above them. They huddled together, trying to find some semblance of warmth in the cold chaos of the desert storm. As they rested, Aldrin could not shake the feeling that the storm was more than just a natural occurrence. There was something sinister about it, something almost purposeful. It felt like the desert was testing them, as if it were aware of their presence and was actively trying to drive them away. But they could not leave. Not yet. The storm raged for hours, but eventually, the winds began to settle, and the suffocating sandstorm seemed to lose its strength. The brigade, though tired and covered in layers of fine, gritty sand, knew that they couldn't afford to rest for long. The desert was a place of constant danger, where respite was only a brief illusion before the next trial arrived. Aldrin emerged first from their shelter beneath the rocks, squinting against the dimming light of the fading storm. The desert had shifted again, the dunes reshaping as the winds calmed. In a way, it felt as if the land itself had become a living entity, forever changing and unpredictable. "The storm seems to have passed," Aldrin said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of their journey's toll. "We should move quickly." Caden nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the horizon. "The winds are still shifting the sands. We'll lose our way if we don't keep moving." Lyra, her face etched with fatigue, wiped the sand from her brow and stood. "The keeper spoke of the trail of light, a path that will guide us to the one we seek." But the desert doesn't make it easy to find such things. Perhaps we should follow the stars tonight. Aldrin's gaze turned skyward. The stars above were like scattered jewels, far off and distant, but their brilliance was a guide if only they could read their patterns. We will trust the stars. They have guided many before us. As they began to move again, the desert stretched out endlessly before them, a vast ocean of sand and sky. The air was still, and the desert seemed to hold its breath, as though waiting for them to make their next move. The brigade journeyed through the night, with only the soft crunch of their boots against the sand to break the eerie silence. Aldrin led the way, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, his mind focused on the path ahead. But the desert had a way of playing tricks on the mind. The whispers of the wind seemed to murmur in the distance, as though calling out to them from all directions. "Do you hear that?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes darting nervously around the endless stretch of sand. Aldrin nodded. The desert speaks in its own way. It's not uncommon for travelers to hear voices, though they are often just the wind playing tricks. But Lyra shook her head. "No, this feels different. It's as though something is watching us. Waiting for us." Caden, who had been walking in silence, spoke up, his voice low but firm. "Perhaps we are being guided, or perhaps the desert itself is testing us. Either way, we cannot afford to falter." The brigade pushed forward, determined not to let their fear control them. But as they continued, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. And then, for a fleeting moment, Aldrin thought he saw a figure, a shadow that moved just at the edge of his vision. "Did you see that?" he asked urgently, his heart racing. Caden's eyes narrowed. "What? Where?" Aldrin looked back toward the shifting sands, but the figure was gone. The desert was once again empty, save for the trio of travelers and the relentless dunes that stretched on forever. "Nothing," Aldrin said, shaking his head. It was nothing, but deep down, he knew something was out there. The desert was alive, and it had taken notice of them. Days passed, and the sand seemed to stretch on without end. The brigade had found no sign of the mysterious figure, yet the feeling of being watched never left them. The whispers, though faint, still reached their ears, like faint echoes on the wind. On the fourth day after the storm, as they climbed over a ridge of dunes, something caught their attention. Below them, nestled in the valley, was an oasis, a mirage, perhaps, or so they thought at first. "It's real," Lyra whispered in awe. "Look." Aldrin scanned the area. The lush green of the oasis was stark against the barren desert around it. A small spring bubbled gently, and the palm trees offered a rare respite from the sun's unforgiving heat. "This could be the break we need," Caden said, his voice filled with cautious optimism. "We can rest here for a while." But Aldrin, always the cautious leader, stepped forward, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "We need to be careful. In the desert, things are rarely as they seem. Let's approach slowly." They made their way toward the oasis, careful not to alert anyone or anything that might be watching them. As they reached the edge of the spring, the sound of rushing water seemed to bring a sense of peace. The air was cooler here, and the desert's oppressive weight seemed to lift for the first time in days. "This place. It feels different," Lyra murmured as she knelt to drink from the spring. "Like it's been waiting for us." Aldrin stood silently, watching her. He had learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts told him that something here was not quite right. The oasis was too perfect, too welcoming. "Stay alert," he said, though his voice was quiet, almost lost in the whispering wind. Suddenly, a voice echoed out from behind them. "Welcome, travelers." The brigade spun around, drawing their weapons, but the figure who stood before them was not an enemy. Instead, it was a woman dressed in flowing robes. her skin darkened by the desert sun, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly wisdom. "You are in the oasis of lost souls," she continued, her voice gentle, but filled with a sense of ancient power. "Few find this place, and fewer still survive the journey here. What is it you seek, travelers?" Aldrin's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword, his gaze never leaving the mysterious woman. "We seek the one who shattered the world, the one who lost his way, the one who wanders these sands." The woman smiled, a sad and knowing smile. "You seek the one who was once a protector, a guardian, yes, but now, he is nothing more than a shadow of his former self. And even the desert cannot erase the scars of his soul." Aldrin's heart raced. Could this be the key to finding their enemy? "Where is he?" Caden demanded, his voice strained with impatience. "Tell us, and we will stop him." The woman's smile faded, and her eyes grew somber. "The path to him is fraught with pain. He is hidden, lost in the desert's heart, and only those who are truly ready to face the darkness within themselves can find him." Aldrin stepped forward, determination in his eyes. Aldrin stepped forward, determination in his eyes. "We are ready. We've walked through endless sand and faced every trial the desert has to offer. We will face him, no matter the cost." The woman looked at them long and hard, her gaze penetrating. There was something ancient in her eyes, as though she had seen countless souls pass through the desert, each searching for answers they could never find. After a long pause, she spoke softly, as if imparting a final piece of wisdom. "Very well, but know this: the desert does not give up its secrets freely. It will test you, and even when you think you have found your way, the journey will change you. You will see things you may wish you had never seen. And the one you seek, he will not be the man you expect." With those cryptic words, she turned away and began walking toward the heart of the oasis. "Follow me," she said without looking back, her voice like the desert wind. "The path begins now." The brigade followed the mysterious woman into the depths of the oasis. The palm trees gave way to rocky terrain, and the coolness of the water was replaced by the harsh heat of the desert once more. But here, the sand seemed to be different, darker, almost as if it had been stained by time. The air grew heavier with each step, the weight of the desert pressing down on them like an unspoken promise. The woman led them in silence, her steps sure and steady, as though she had walked this path 1,000 times before. Every so often, she would glance back, as if measuring their progress, but she did not speak again. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days, it was impossible to tell. The sun hung in the sky, unmoving, casting a strange, ethereal light over the desert. Finally, they reached the heart of the desert, a place where the sand was blackened, and the wind whispered secrets of ancient times. In the center of the barren expanse, they saw him sitting motionless, a figure draped in tattered robes, his face obscured by a hood. He was no longer the protector he once had been. He had become something else, something lost to time. "Is that him?" Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. Aldrin's eyes narrowed. "It must be." The woman stood beside them, her expression unreadable. "This is the one you seek. The one who lost his way." The figure did not move, but the air around him seemed to vibrate with an unsettling energy. Aldrin took a step forward, his heart racing. Every instinct told him to draw his sword, to be ready for a battle. But the woman placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. "Do not be hasty," she said, her voice calm but firm. "He is not what you think he is." Aldrin looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "He destroyed everything. He shattered the world." The woman's eyes softened. "He was once the guardian of this land. He was its protector, its shield. But something broke inside him, something that even the desert could not heal. Now, he is neither man nor spirit. He is the shadow of what he once was. The woman stepped forward, her voice now echoing with the weight of ancient knowledge. His name was Kalen, and his soul was intertwined with the desert. But he sought more. He tried to control it. And in doing so, he lost himself. That's the end of today's story. See you.